We're at the BAYOU and the BAYOU Bullpen KOL interviews with Jim Guenther, who is here to talk about Startup Grind. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you. Thank you for your time today.
Jim, can you tell us a little bit about your background in business? I know you're a scientist and you've done a lot in that space, but give us a little bit of your business credit, because that pertains to Startup Grind.
Sure, I'll give you the transition. So again, I'm a typical protein chemist is where I started off. And several years ago, I was asked to produce a biotech program at a community college. When I started working on that, I started working with our local companies here in the city. And that led me to Steve Blank's Lean Launchpad and Business Model Canvas. And I've got to tell you, that absolutely changed my life. Up until that point, I had no idea that there was a process in business development that's very similar to scientific hypothesis testing. So scientific method, hypothesis testing goes hand in hand. You've got an idea for your business, you've got an idea for your customers. How do you go out and test that as a hypothesis instead of building a business and finding out that your hypothesis is wrong? So I started with that. I've actually met Steve Blank a couple of times and got to chat with him. He's a really cool cat. And that brought me into things like the I-Core program, SBIR development, and of course, there was an opportunity opened up in New Orleans for a chapter director for Startup Grind. And Startup Grind is a global entrepreneurship community. We have chapters all over the globe. And this is the neat part about it, is that I can get on a call with somebody in Hong Kong that's one of the other chapter directors. And several times a month, I'll end up chatting with them. They've got a chapter in Eldoret, Kenya that I've talked to and been on board for their calls several times, hearing about what's going on, where is their businesses going. So it gives you a really kind of global perspective, and I think that's kind of unique and something that I love being able to bring and access into our community here in New Orleans.
And so how are you leveraging that in the city? Do you kind of have regular meetings where you convey this information, or what are you currently doing with Startup Grind?
So Startup Grind itself, chapter directors have regular meetings once a month. Typically, I try to have one meeting here in New Orleans at least once a month. And then the other thing that I make as an open opportunity is, so I've got a friend of mine that's going to New York next week. Why don't you let me introduce you to that chapter director in New York while you're in the city? And also I've got a good friend of mine that's another chapter director coming in from Pittsburgh. And I'm going to have them come down to meet our community. So it's kind of a cross-pollination that I see as being interesting there.
It's a huge connectivity point and a network, and a way to get that network without having to do a lot of the work.
It's amazing, the network. There are some of the neatest people that you just want to end up talking to them. So that's the fun part about the whole situation. Yes.
Yeah. And then the final thing, which I think from the communities at this point, is it's all about finding someone, helping, and then repeating. So for Startup Grind, what is your ask of the community and how can it help you?
So I really want people in this community that are interested in business development, in startups, talk to me. I'm always looking for help setting up events. I'm always looking for ideas for events. And I think there's a lot of room for creativity there. I've always found that the worst thing you can do is say, oh no, we've got one single model for this. And you've got to stick to this model. I want to bring on board people to, help build this chapter that are going to be interested in doing things like bringing their own flavor into it. So that's my ask.
Well, Jim, thank you so much for making time. We always appreciate sitting down and chatting with you.
All right. Thanks again.